Who let the temp in? The voice came from the top of the ladder well, pitched to carry. Damage Controlman First Class Bryce Fenner, 29 years old, stood on the grating of a ship that had never touched water and grinned down at a compartment full of recruits. And the recruits, 81 of them, Division 219, 3 days from the end of everything they thought was hard, laughed the way young people laugh when a man with a collar device invites them to. The woman at the hose station did not move. She was 46. Dark hair pulled back tight, civilian blouse, gray slacks, a lanyard with a visitor badge that read, M. Kessler, contractor, and nothing else. Her right hand rested on the folded length of a 2.5-inch hose, not leaning, resting, the way a hand rests on a railing it has known for a long time. "Ma'am, that's a training device," Fenner said, coming down the ladder with the ease of a man who owned the room and knew it. "It's not a coat rack. Records office is in the other building. The one with the carpet." More laughter. A tall recruit near the front, Seaman Recruit Cade Purcell, 19, jaw like a recruiting poster, laughed loudest, checking Fenner's face while he did it, the way a dog checks its owner. The woman took her hand off the hose. "My mistake," she said. 3 words. Even. She stepped back 1 pace, exactly 1, and the compartment went back to its business, and the morning swallowed the moment the way mornings do. It was 0800 on the 1st of July, 2026, inside the battle station's trainer at Naval Station Great Lakes, a building the size of a hangar with a destroyer grown inside it. Steel decks, knee knockers, ladder wells, and berthing compartments, and a fire main that pushed real water at real pressure through mock passageways where smoke machines waited behind the vents. Recruits came here on their final night of boot camp and fought the ship for 12 hours. The Navy had built a storm and put it indoors. The paperwork that had put Marin Kessler inside it was 11 days old and wrong. The schoolhouse had requisitioned a contract records technician, digitization backlog, start date Monday. The badge office, overworked and undermanned, had seen a civilian named Kessler on an access list and printed the badge without reading the second page. She had looked at the badge and looked at the trainer through the fence and let it stand. 10 days. 10 quiet days to walk the spaces before the spaces belonged to her. Some officers wanted a brief and a binder before a change of command. She had always preferred the deck plates. Fenner gathered Division 219 at the hose station she had touched and held up the Y-gate like a preacher with a text. "Somebody seated this coupling wrong," he announced. "This is why civilians don't touch the trainer. Gasket sits proud. You lose pressure at the gate, your fire team dies in a passageway. Watch." He seated it wrong. He seated it wrong with total confidence, a quarter turn shy. The gasket cocked 2 degrees off its shoulder, and 81 recruits wrote it down in their heads as gospel, because he wore the uniform, and the woman by the records cart did not. Kessler crossed behind the division while they scribbled. She did not appear to look at the Y-gate at all. Her hand went out, turned the coupling a quarter turn with a small, dry click, palmed the gasket flush, and was back on the cart handle before the nearest recruit looked up. The whole correction took 4 seconds, and she performed it the way other people breathe. One recruit saw it. A small, serious 19-year-old named Tessa Vaught, 3rd row, who had been the only one not laughing at 0800. Vaught looked at the coupling, looked at the woman's retreating back, said nothing, wrote something different in her notebook, and one other man saw it, from the shadows of the control mezzanine, through glass that had watched 14 years of pretend fires. Otis Granger, 61, civilian simulator technician, was a master chief the way a retired judge is still a judge. The title had soaked into the bone, and no paperwork could get it back out. 30 years in Hools, 11 of them teaching this building to burn on schedule. He watched the woman in the civilian blouse step over the knee knockers without breaking stride, without looking down. Nobody clears the first frame of this building without looking down. Office temps hit that steel lip like it insulted them. And he watched her eyes travel the overhead vents, left to right, reading airflow the way musicians read a page. Office temps trip on the first frame, Granger said, to no one in the empty mezzanine. Below him, the woman stopped at the aft bulkhead of the mock engine room. The compartment was cold iron. Nothing ran. Nothing hummed. She laid her hand flat against the steel anyway, held it there 4 seconds, listening through her palm for machinery that did not exist, for vibration the building had never once produced, and something crossed her face that was almost a smile. Granger turned from the glass. In the bottom drawer of his tool crib, under coiled det cord for the smoke charges and a coffee can of pipe fittings, lay a gray binder he had not opened in years. Dust on the spine. 7 block letters on the dust. Halloway. He pulled it out. The second morning, Division 219 failed a hose advance, and the hose won. 2.5-inch line, charged, 4 recruits on it, moving up a mock passageway toward a red strobe pretending to be a fire. The nozzle man opened too fast. The line kicked like something alive. It is something alive. 150 pounds per square inch of alive. And the whip threw Cade Purcell off the number 2 position and put him on the deck plates hard enough to bounce. Fenner stopped the evolution. He had a gift for stopping evolutions in a way that assigned blame before anyone spoke. Somebody, he said, walking the line, wasn't braced. Somebody thinks the ocean cares about your feelings. Reset it. They reset it. The line kicked again. Slower this time, but wrong the same way. And any man with 30 years in Hools could have seen the problem wasn't bracing. The woman with the records cart came through the passageway behind them, pushing files nobody needed anywhere, and said, without stopping, at a volume meant for one person, "Short the loop." 3 words. The senior recruit on the hose team heard them, looked at the service loop dragging 6 feet behind the nozzle, too long, storing the whip like a spring, and hauled it forward into a tight bite against the bulkhead. They opened the nozzle. The line stood up, leaned into the team, and behaved. Fenner turned. He had not seen where the fix came from, and then he had, and his face did something brief and ugly before returning to instructional charm. A correction from the mezzanine was Tuesday. A correction from Granger was tolerable, barely old man privilege. A correction from the temp, in front of his division, in 3 words that worked. He filed it. Not as information, as debt. 2009, the Arabian Gulf, 111 degrees on the flight deck at 0200, the kind of heat that follows a destroyer's crew down every ladder and sleeps in the racks with them. The ship does not matter yet. The name will matter later. What matters is the lieutenant walking main engine room 2 on the midwatch, face unseen in the sodium dark between turbines, silver bars on a sweat-salted collar, trailing one hand along the hose stations as she went, touching each one twice. Coupling, gasket. Coupling, gasket. A second-class petty officer named Pell, 24, Georgia vowels, a laugh that carried over turban wine, watched her do it the way he watched her do it every midwatch. "You pat the ship like it's a dog, ma'am," Pell said. "Dogs bite strangers," the lieutenant said. "I'm making sure it knows me." "That's supposed to work?" "Ask the ship." "Ship says you're the only officer aboard who knows where Locker 3's spanner wrench lives," Pell said. "XO couldn't find it with a search party." "The XO has never needed it at 2 in the morning with the lights out," the lieutenant said. "I plan on needing it exactly then. Everything in this space is where my hands think it is. That's not tidiness, Pell. That's a promise I'm making to a knight I haven't met yet. Pell thought about that longer than he let on. Sailors do. Pell laughed his flight deck laugh in the deep of the engine room, and the turbines whined on, and 11 days of quiet remained on the clock of that deployment, though the clock was visible to no one. At Great Lakes, on the second afternoon, Otis Granger ran a quiet experiment, because Master Chiefs conduct experiments the way scientists do, except the paperwork is invisible. He mislabeled a repair locker inventory, transposed 2 entries, aged out a date, misnumbered 9 fittings out of 40, and left the clipboard hanging where the records cart would pass it. An office temp would file it. A yeoman would retype it. He wanted to know what this woman would do with a wrong ship. At 1640, the clipboard came back to its hook. 9 corrections. Margin notations in a small, square, upright hand. Not the loops of an office, the block print of someone who had written legibly wearing gloves, in the dark, against steel. Each discrepancy caught, each entry redated. The misnumbered fittings not only corrected, but resequenced to match stowage order, walk order, the order a repair party leader would want them in with smoke in the space. Granger took the clipboard into the tool crib and set it on the bench beside the open gray binder, beside a photocopied page of a damage control log, 20 April 2009, written underway, written in casualty, written in a small, square, upright hand. He looked from one page to the other for a long time. The handwriting matched. Granger closed the binder. He did not tell anyone. 30 years teaches a man that some information is a loaded weapon, and you do not hand loaded weapons to a compartment full of children. But that evening, walking to his truck, he passed the woman in the parking lot and, without stopping, without turning his head, gave her one sentence. "Building runs better this week, ma'am." If she understood the honorific, if she noticed the weight he put down gently on the last word, she gave him nothing back but the small nod strangers give each other in parking lots, which was, he thought, driving home, exactly what the lieutenant in that binder would have done. By the 4th day, the joke had organized itself the way jokes do inside institutions. It acquired structure, a distribution schedule, middle management. Someone chalked a stick figure on the damage control status board. Lanyard, gigantic badge, a bun. Temp, block letters with an arrow. Purcell added the coffee cup. Between evolutions, Division 219 developed a call and response. A recruit would touch any piece of equipment, and another would say, "Low, careful, you'll get temped," and the compartment would ripple. Fenner did not start the joke. He did something more efficient. He let it live. He fed it in small ways, a smirk at the right beat, a pause before the word civilian that framed it, because the laughter kept landing on his side of the room, and a man who teaches to the crowd counts the room the way other men count money. On the 5th morning, he sent her for coffee. "Galleys across the quad," he said, holding out his cup without looking at her, a king extending a scepter. "If the badge lets you in, honey. Cream, 2 sugars." The compartment held its breath, delighted. She took the cup. She walked across the quad in the July sun and stood in the galley line with recruits who fell silent around her and walked back. She set the coffee at his elbow at 0900 exactly. Not near 9, not about 9. The master clock in the control room turned over. The very second the cup touched steel, though only one man in the building was in a position to notice that, and he was on the mezzanine, noticing. "Anything else?" she asked. 2 words. "That'll be all," Fenner said to laughter, and the laughter had a shape. It always does. A ring, with one woman standing in the center of it, perfectly still. She carried the next hour the way she had carried the coffee, like cargo, time-stamped, receipted. Some people you cannot insult downward. They simply file it. She had a filing system older than anyone in the room knew, and it had never once lost a document. Not everything in the compartment was laughing. Tessa Vaught wasn't. On the 6th day, a recruit shouldered past the records card in the P-way, and a clipboard went spinning across the deck plates. And it was Vaught, small, serious, permanently unimpressed by the joke, who crossed against traffic, picked it up, squared the papers, and handed it back. "Ma'am," Vaught said. "Just that." "Thank you," Kessler said, and something passed between them that had no witnesses and no name. Recognition traveling downhill, from someone who had once been a serious 19-year-old to someone who was one now. Purcell hissed at Vaught the whole way back to formation. "You're polishing up the Temp. She's a punchline, Vaught." "She fixed the Y-gate Fenner seated wrong," Vaught said. "She what?" "Forget it," Vaught said, who had learned already that some information is a loaded weapon. That night, in the 60 seconds of free time the Navy issues before taps, Vaught opened her notebook to the page where recruits were supposed to log lessons learned. Under hose advance, short the loop, and Y-gate, gasket flush, she had started a third column with no heading. It held observations that belonged to no curriculum. Walks poured out, starboard back, 4 minutes even. Checks watch from the inside. Never looks down at the knee knockers. Corrected DC-1 twice, quiet both times, right both times. Vaught looked at the column for a while, then closed the notebook without adding a conclusion. She was 18 days from being a sailor, and already understood the first rule of standing watch. Write down what you see, even when what you see makes no sense yet, especially then. On the mezzanine stairs that afternoon, Otis Granger tried, once, the mild way. The way you offer a man a ladder while he's still only ankle-deep in the hole. "You might ask yourself," Granger said, "where a records temp learned hose geometry." Fenner grinned up at him, easy, generous, 29 years old and bulletproof. "From a temp agency, Master Chief." He said the retired title the way you'd hand someone a participation trophy, and went down the stairs 2 at a time, and did not see the old man's face change, and would remember the exchange later, with the specific clarity that mercy acquires after it has been declined. The building hummed on. Smoke charges got racked for the night's evolution. And the woman in the civilian blouse pushed her cart down the starboard P-way at her exact walking pace, past the chalk figure on the status board, and did not look at it, because she had been mocked by professionals on 3 oceans, and this was not professional work. Here's the thing about a room full of people laughing at the wrong person. The room always believes it has a comfortable amount of time to be wrong in. If your jaw is tight right now, if you've stood in the center of a ring like that and held your face still, subscribe to Honor Tales, because this particular room is 9 days from finding out who signs their graduation certificates, and you're going to want to be standing here when it does. The report took Fenner 40 minutes to write and read like it had taken 4. Subject: unauthorized civilian interaction with training device. He cited the Y-gate. Contract personnel observed manipulating pressurized fire main fittings without qualification or authorization. He cited the hose evolution. Individual issued procedural direction to recruits during a supervised evolution. He cited in the reports one moment of accidental honesty, the thing that actually bothered him. Individual displays unexplained familiarity with shipboard systems. Unexplained. The word did a lot of work. A curious man would have chased the explanation. Fenner requested her badge pulled instead, pending review of contractor credentials, and routed the report up through the schoolhouse office and slept well. The badge office, it turned out, was happy to help him be wrong. The real records temp was starting Monday. The contract in the folder said so. The name on the contract wasn't quite the name on the badge, because the badge had been a mix-up from the first morning. The clerk saw a discrepancy, and discrepancies in badge offices resolve one direction only. The flag went on at 1100. Access suspended. Review. Kessler learned it at the turnstile, from the light going red. She looked at the red light for 2 seconds. Then she checked her watch, an old diver's watch, steel, worn with the face turned to the inside of the wrist, the way you wear it when a glowing dial can get a hole put in you, and stepped back from the turnstile and recalibrated her afternoon, visibly, the way a navigator recalibrates around weather. The guards watched her walk the fence line to the visitor office at a pace so even you could have set a metronome by it. 4 minutes to the door. She did it in 4 minutes. 0311, 20 April 2009. Fuel oil mist from a flexing supply line found the hot lagging of a manifold in main engine room 2, and the compartment did what compartments do when the worst true thing finally happens, after 10,000 drills about it. It lit off. The fire did not roar to start. It thumped, a soft, deep, obscene sound, like a mattress dropped flat. And then every alarm the ship owned went off at once, and the midwatch became the entire remaining life of some of the men in that space. On the damage control net, before the general quarters pipe had even finished, came a voice, female, level, unhurried in a way that had nothing to do with slowness. A voice that had decided, some years earlier, that speed and panic were different tools, and it would only ever carry one of them. Fire, 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 main engine room 2, Class Bravo, repair. 2, dress out. The pipe screamed, boots hit ladders, and the voice went on beneath the chaos like a keel. Boundaries next, attack team second, breathe last. The audience of this story has heard that voice before, every syllable of it. It has been coming out of the temp with the records cart for 4 days, at conversational volume, in a building shaped like a ship that cannot sink and has never burned. Division 219 has heard it too. They just don't know it yet. At Great Lakes, the review took a day to not happen. Reviews of unimportant people are like that. The file sat in a queue, and the queue belonged to procedure, and procedure said, contractor access disputes at a training command, routed to the commanding officer's office. And because the command was 11 days from a change of command, standing instruction added 1 line to the routing stamp, a line nobody in the chain read twice. Forwarded to incoming co for review. Fenner got his copy back and read the stamp and felt the satisfaction of a man watching machinery work on his behalf. The system had accepted his account. The system was carrying it upward, to authority, to the desk where such things were decided. He had, in the most literal sense available to the English language, mailed his complaint to its own subject. She kept working, meanwhile, on a visitor escort pass that the badge office grudgingly issued for the records contract's paperwork, reduced access, escorted spaces, a pass 1 shade of yellow away from an insult. She took it without comment. And the building, if you knew how to watch it, began to organize itself quietly around her, the way iron filings organize around something you can't see. She walked the P-ways at exact 4-minute intervals, port side out, starboard back, the pattern of a sounding and security watch that no one had assigned her. She stood a moment at each hose station without appearing to stop, her wrist turned, twice an hour, checking a watch face that pointed at her pulse. Granger tracked her circuit from the mezzanine with the binder open on his knees, and understood, with the specific vertigo of a man watching a legend do laps, that she was not killing time. She was standing watch, on his building, on the children in it. The routing stamp sat in a folder in an empty office, waiting for its owner to arrive and read it, The folder had no idea what it was holding. Neither did the man who'd filled it. Granger went into the archive cage on the 8th day and stayed there through lunch. The cage held the schoolhouse's institutional memory, curriculum revisions, incident files, the provenance records for every training aid in the building. He pulled the folder for the damage control doctrine film. The one every recruit division watched twice and heard in fragments 100 times. The film whose lines recruits recited in their racks the night before battle stations the way other generations had recited prayers. Most of the folder was routing memos, but page 4 was a studio session log, 2011, Naval Service Training Command, and stapled behind it, the incident audio provenance sheet, and on the sheet a line of type he had walked past for years without reading. Incident audio, USS Halloway, DDG, 20th of April 2009. Net speaker, LTM Kessler, damage control assistant. Granger owned a set of ancient headphones and a cassette deck old enough to vote. He played 10 seconds of the archived net audio. 10 seconds only. Boundaries next. Attack team second. Breathe last. His hands went still on the bench. In the trainer below, faint through the decking, he could hear the records cart's wheels moving up the starboard P-way at the pace of a metronome. The same afternoon, a recruit from Division 219 stood at the Sims net box, fumbling the report format for a mock fuel fire, while Fenner ran the drill from the console. "There's smoke in the, we have a fire in—" "You're dead," Fenner called, bored. Again. The recruit reset, flustered, worse. The records cart came through the compartment on its exact schedule, and the temp said, in passing, flat and quiet, to the recruit and no one else, "Fire, fire, fire. Then location. Then class. Then who you need. Breathe last." The recruit said it that way. The recruit passed. And here, right here, the two halves of this story touched for the first time, because the audience has now heard that cadence twice. Once from a lieutenant on a burning destroyer 17 years ago, and once from a woman pushing a records cart through a fake ship, and the cadence is not similar. It is identical. Word, weight, and interval. The same voice, older, saying the same catechism, because she is the same woman, and the film Division 219 has memorized is not narration. It's her worst night, playing on a loop for children. Nobody in the compartment heard the ship of it. Fenner heard only the dead again, corrected again in front of his drill, and this time he decided to collect in public. But first, the fence line. Granger caught up to her at the end of the day, off the record. 2 civilians in a parking lot with the trainer's superstructure throwing its long, fake shadow across the asphalt. "I did 30 years, Granger said. "I know what a DCA's hands look like." She looked at him for a moment. The evaluation was brief and complete, the way a triage is. "Then you know what patience looks like," she said. "I know what it costs," he said. "There a reason you're paying it?" 10 more days of quiet," she said. "There are worse prices." He asked nothing else. Master Chiefs and Lieutenants had been having this conversation for 200 years. The whole exchange, fully loaded in under 30 words. And he walked to his truck feeling 20 years younger and appallingly afraid for the young man running tomorrow's contest. Because there was a contest coming. Fenner announced it the next morning with the generosity of a man laying a trap in daylight. The fire main scenario board, the alignment puzzle his divisions failed 6 times out of 10, valves and cross-connects, and a casualty cascade on a shot clock. Schoolhouse record, 4 minutes 40. He invited the temp to the console with a sweep of the arm, and invited the compartment to watch, and said it, the words that were going to follow him down every P-way of his career. "Watch and learn, honey." She sat down. She looked at the board for one breath, the way you look at an old photograph of your own house. Her hands went to the console and the compartment got its show. just not the one it had been promised. The scenario opened with a ruptured cross-connect and cascaded on schedule. Pressure bleeding aft, a simulated pump tripping offline, 3 casualty flags stacking up on the shot clock. The failure mode, 6 times out of 10, was panic by checklist. Recruits, and more than a few instructors chasing the flags in the order they appeared instead of the order the water cared about. Kessler did not chase. She isolated the rupture first, took the pressure loss she could afford to buy the alignment she couldn't live without, brought the standby pump up before the board even asked for it, and worked the remaining flags in an order no checklist in the building taught. The order you learn in a space where the checklist is on fire. 4 minutes and 11 seconds later, the board stood aligned, the cascade contained, the shot clock blinking a number the schoolhouse had never seen, and the laughter in the compartment died, the way compartments die in a real casualty, in sections, going dark one at a time, until the only sound left was the ventilation. The record screen blinked. Patient. Enter name. She typed nothing. She stood, squared the chair to the console, and walked back to her cart. And if you need to know what name belongs in that blank, stay with this story and subscribe to Honor Tales, because the building itself is about to say it out loud, over every speaker it owns. Now the whole of it. The audience has earned this part. The room downstairs has not and isn't getting it yet. 20 April 2009. The destroyer USS Halloway, Arabian Gulf, 320 souls. At 0311, main engine room 2 lit off, and the ship's damage control assistant, Lieutenant Marin Kessler, 29 years old, 4 years an officer, 11 years in the Navy counting the enlisted time nobody at the wardroom table ever quite remembered, became, for the next 3 hours, the ship's whole future funneled through one voice on one net. She held Repair Locker 2, 2 hose teams, a fire main losing pressure aft because the casualty was eating its own firefighting water. Halon system already spent on the first thump, a hatch over main engine room. 2 starting to buckle its dogs from heat, which is a sentence engineers write in reports and sailors carry for the rest of their lives. She sent no one anywhere she would not stand herself. That was the whole doctrine, before it was doctrine. Attack team in through the forward trunk on her word, given twice, calm both times, after she had read the smoke with a bare hand on the hatch dogs. Boundaries set and reset as the paint blistered on the far side of 2 bulkheads. When fire main pressure aft dropped through 60 pounds, she rerouted through the forward loop off a diagram she drew from memory on the deck with chalk, because the plates for that system were in a space nobody could reach, and the patch held, and the pressure came back, and the plan she chalked on a deck at 0400 is, with minor revision, the plan the fleet trains to now. And at 0550, with the reflash watch set and the second team backing out through the trunk, the overhead in main engine room 2 let go. Damage Controlman Second Class Aaron Pell, 24, of Valdosta, Georgia. The laugh that carried over turbine whine, the man who told a lieutenant she patted the ship like a dog, was holding the reflash watch so the second team could back out. Every man on that team came out. Pell did not. She went back in for him twice. The second time, 2 hull technicians had to pull her out of the trunk by the harness, and the ship's log for that minute records only, in a small, square, upright hand, gone suddenly ragged. R2 holding. All stations manned. The Halloway came home listing 4 degrees under her patching plan, alive. 319. They gave her the Navy and Marine Corps Medal the following spring, the highest thing the Navy hands out for valor without an enemy, on a parade ground she barely remembered, for a citation she has never once read aloud. She declined the transfer ashore that traditionally follows. she went back to sea. But in 2011, Naval Service Training Command rebuilt the recruit damage control curriculum around the Holloway casualty, and they asked her to record narration, and she sat in a studio ashore for one afternoon and gave them their lines. The editors kept almost none of it. They kept cutting back to the real net audio instead, the actual traffic, because no actor and no narrator could say repair to, dress out the way she had said it. And she had said it that way for the simplest reason in the world. She wasn't acting. In her wallet, behind the ID card, lives a piece of paper folded to the softness of cloth. One line in a mother's handwriting from Valdosta, Georgia. Teach them the way you taught him. That letter is why, when the Navy offered Captain Maren Kessler a training command, she took orders to the one place a surface sailor's story begins. That letter is why she has spent 9 days being a punchline with a records cart and counted the days cheap at the price. Let them laugh. The fake ship downstairs was built out of her worst night, and they play it for children, and it should, internal, held, certain. It should be taught by someone who was there. On the 9th evening, her phone buzzed twice on the rack of her temporary quarters. The change of command brief, moved to July 15th, and the schoolhouse schedule, Division 219, battle stations, night of July 14th. She looked at the yellow escort pass on the desk and the flag on her file, and did the arithmetic of the calendar closing on itself, and let all of it stand exactly as it was. They had decided she was nobody. She would walk into that building one more time as exactly what they had decided she was. In the trainer, on his cart of gear for battle stations night, Bryce Fenner racked the smoke charges, checked the fog oil, and set the film canister in its slot for the berthing compartment screens. The label on the canister, worn half away by 14 years of handling, read, DC Doctrine. Film. Holloway Incident Audio. Restricted. He'd cued it 200 times. He had never once read it. The bright line got crossed on the morning of the 14th, in front of everyone, on camera. Fenner had spent a night deciding the contest had been a trick, a memorized solution, a lucky board, something. Men like Fenner can metabolize almost anything except being smaller than the room thought they were, and by morning he had converted humiliation into administrative energy, which is the most dangerous conversion an institution offers. The Temp's escort pass, he argued to the schoolhouse office at 0730, was itself now a violation. She had interacted with a training device again, in front of witnesses, on the record board. The office, buried in change of command prep, signed the form that was put in front of it. At 0900, 2 masters-at-arms walked into the trainer, polite and miserable, and killed her badge at the turnstile, while Division 219 watched from the mezzanine stairs. "Ma'am, we'll need the pass. You'll be escorted off the installation." "Of course," Kessler said. 2 words. She unclipped the lanyard and laid it in the petty officer's palm, and thanked him, by name, off his name tape, and then, quietly, by watch section. "Long mid last night, you should get some sleep." And the young master-at-arms blinked at her, because how did she, and stood aside. Purcell had his phone up, filming, grinning, until Tessa Vaught reached over without looking at him and pushed his hand down with a flat force that surprised them both. Fenner supervised the whole thing with his arms folded and could not resist the coda. He turned to the recruits on the stairs and said, in his teaching voice, the voice that carried, "That's how the Navy handles people who don't belong." The building's cameras heard him say it. Time-stamped, archived, documentable. He had again filed the evidence himself. Granger watched from the mezzanine and did not argue, because Master Chiefs do not argue with avalanches. They root them. He went down the back ladder to the schoolhouse office while the escort was still crossing the quad, and he did the one thing 30 years had taught him to do instead of shouting. He filed paperwork, a curriculum standards request, unremarkable, routine, boring on purpose, that in view of the graded evolution tonight, the incident audio provenance sheet be printed and attached to the battle station's training film log, per archival standard. The clerk stamped it without reading it. Devastation, routed correctly, looks exactly like housekeeping. The trainer spent the rest of that day out of tune, and everyone in it could feel the detuning without naming it. Fenner ran his afternoon evolutions to a room that had stopped laughing on cue. The temp jokes came up twice and died on the deck plates both times. Purcell tried the coffee line again and got, instead of the ripple, a compartment full of recruits suddenly very interested in their gear. 81 people had watched a woman run the unbeatable board in 4 minutes 11 and then get marched off the installation 18 hours later. And even a recruit 3 days old in the Navy could feel the shape of something wrong in that sequence, could feel it the way you feel a list in a deck before the inclinometer admits it. Vought felt it worst. She kept looking at the empty space by the turnstile, where the records cart usually stood at this hour. 4 minutes passed, now 5, now 6. The schedule broken, and the building somehow louder for the absence of the quietest thing in it. At the gate, flanked by her escort, Maren Kessler stopped and turned and looked back, not at Fenner, not at the recruits, up at the gray superstructure of the ship that had never touched water, standing out of the roof of the building like a memory refusing to submerge. And she smiled. First time in the story. A small one, unhurried, not at him, at the ship. The way you smile at a thing you are about to take back. She let them walk her out. Some doors you leave through quietly, so that the next time you come through them, everyone in the building understands whose doors they are. Night fell hot and windless, July doing its flat, Midwestern work on the asphalt. The buses rolled in under the lights, and Division 219. Heads shaved, hearts hammering. 3 years of growing up compressed into the next 12 hours. Filed into the trainer for battle stations. Past the turnstile where the light had gone red that morning, under the film canister riding Fenner's cart, its worn label facing the dark. Across the installation, in a temporary quarters room with a sea bag packed in the corner, a captain in civilian clothes stood at the window where the trainer's superstructure broke the skyline, and checked the watch on the inside of her wrist, and did nothing at all. 10 days of patience had come down to 12 hours of it. She had stood harder watches. She turned off the light and let the building burn without her one last time. 0100, battle stations night. The trainer was doing its terrible, beautiful work. Smoke thick in the P-ways, alarms in 3 flavors, water on the deck plates, real, cold, ankle deep in the flooding trainer forward. Division 2, 19 moved through it in fire parties, dressed out, breathing hard through masks, being remade. At 0140, per the curriculum they had run for 14 years, the berthing compartment screens lit for the doctrine film. The fire brief before the fire evolution. 81 recruits packed the mock berthing, dripping, exhausted, and the film began the way it had begun for 1,000,000 sailors. Dark screen. Then the voice. Fire. 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 Main engine room 2. Class Bravo. Repair. 2. Dress out. Half the compartment mouthed it along with her. Vought said it out loud, from memory, eyes closed. Every recruit did. Every division had. Generations of them. The catechism. Boundaries next. Attack team second. Breathe last. And then, in the smoky dark, a strange current moved through Division 219. It started nowhere in particular. A recruit's mouth stopped mid-syllable, another's head tilted. Vaught's eyes came open. They knew that voice, not from the film, from the P-ways, from short, the loop, from then location, then class, then who you need. From a woman with a records cart and a punchline for a name, saying the catechism at conversational volume for 9 days while they laughed. Purcell stood in the ankle-deep water with his ears roaring, doing the math of every joke he had told, and arriving, item by item, at the total. The stick figure on the status board, the coffee. If the badge lets you in, honey, careful, you'll get temped. Each entry surfaced with a time and a place attached, the way sins do when the accounting finally opens. And at the bottom of the column stood the woman on the film, 17 years younger, holding a burning compartment, steady with her voice, while he had added the coffee cup to the chalk drawing. He did not laugh. He was never, in any complete sense, going to laugh again. The film ran on. Recruits who had mouthed the catechism 100 times heard it now, as if for the first time, because it had a face, and the face had pushed a cart past their bunks, and there is no instruction the Navy can write that teaches what that moment taught 81 people about the cost of deciding who somebody is by their badge. At the log station by the hatch, Otis Granger did what the curriculum standards request he'd filed that morning now required. He lifted the provenance sheet and read the attached line aloud, per archival standard, in the voice master chiefs are issued at the 20-year mark, the one that carries through smoke and alarms and 14 years of not being listened to. Incident audio, USS Halloway, 20 April, 2009. Net speaker, Lieutenant Maren Kessler, Damage Control Assistant. Beside him, Bryce Fenner's face did the full transit, in order, each stop clearly marked. Confusion, the name meaning nothing for one merciful second. Disbelief, the name meaning something impossible. Recognition, the Y-gate, the hose loop, the board, the handwriting, the honey, the whole 90-mile-an-hour freight of it arriving at once. And then horror, which is recognition doing arithmetic. The report, the badge, the escort, the camera. That's how the Navy handles people who don't belong. The film played on over all of it, patient, 17 years old, her voice holding the burning compartment steady, and 81 recruits stood in the water and listened to the Temp save 319 lives. At 0600, gray light, evolution complete, the schoolhouse yeoman crossed the quad and pinned the morning orders to the board, the way morning orders had been posted since before any of them were born. Change of command, recruit training command. 15th of July, 2026. Incoming commanding officer, Captain Maren Kessler, United States Navy. Fenner read it with his own returned complaint still folded in his cargo pocket, the routing stamp showing at the crease. Forwarded to incoming co for review. He had mailed his account of the Temp to the Temp. It had been on her desk before her sea bag was. At 0620, she came through the turnstile. New badge, same civilian blouse, escorted this time by Captain Ellis Rourke, the outgoing commanding officer, 52 years of Navy in his posture, who performed exactly one ceremonial act. He held the door. No formation was called. No one piped attention on deck. That would have been the old story, and this was not that story. Instead, in ones and twos, unordered, ragged, entirely on its own. The compartment stood. Vaught first. Then the recruit she'd coached at the net box. Then rows of them, wet and exhausted, and standing anyway, the way a truth stands up inside a room when it's done waiting. Kessler looked at 81 standing recruits and gave them the whole of her attention for one long moment. "Carry on," she said. 2 words. They would repeat those two words to each other for the rest of their lives. At the log station, the paused film held its frame. Her 17 years younger voice stopped mid-sentence on the screen. And down the passageway, in the schoolhouse office, a light came on at 0622, her office now, the door standing open, and inside it, visible from the P-way where Fenner stood very still, one chair, waiting, squared exactly to the desk. There were no handcuffs. Handcuffs would have been easier. At 0700, Kessler sat behind a desk that had been hers for less than an hour, with Rourke standing at the window as continuity and Granger at the wall as memory, and read Bryce Fenner's report back to Bryce Fenner, line by line, in a voice that never once rose. Unauthorized civilian interaction with a training device. A pause. The device was misseated. The civilian corrected it. Individual issued procedural direction to recruits. A pause. The direction was the doctrine. You were teaching it wrong. Individual displays unexplained familiarity with shipboard systems. A long pause, the longest of his life. Petty Officer Fenner, it was never unexplained. It was only unasked. He waited for the ending he had taught 81 recruits to expect: the arrest, the court-martial, the institutional guillotine. He had spent the hours since 0140 rehearsing for it, composing the statement he would give, the apology that would be entered into a record and change nothing. He knew how this went. Everyone knew how this went. It didn't come. What came was worse, and better, and much longer. There will be no charges, she said. You didn't break a law. You broke a habit this schoolhouse cannot afford. You taught to the crowd instead of the sailor. So here is the finding. You will requalify as a facilitator. Every scenario in the building, from cold. Your instructor of record is standing in front of you. First session is 0530 tomorrow. Bring the Y gate. Fenner opened his mouth and closed it, and found, somewhere under 9 days of rubble, the beginning of the man he could still become. Yes, ma'am. One more thing. She slid a folded paper across the desk. Not his report. A photocopy. A single line in a mother's handwriting. He read it. He looked up. You teach my worst night, Kessler said. You'll learn it properly, not for me, for him. If a story about patience ever tightened your throat, if you've ever watched the quiet one turn out to be the one who wrote the book, this is the moment to subscribe to Honor Tales, because every one of these stories ends where this one is about to, with the account settled and the right voice back on the net. Division 2, 19 graduated on the 17th of July under a hard blue morning. At pass and review, the incoming commanding officer's first official act was reading the honor graduate citation. Seaman recruit Tessa Vaught, for, the wording was Kessler's own, sustained attention to what was actually happening. Vaught's salute cracked. Kessler's return was level as a horizon. Purcell crossed the grinder afterward, found the new commanding officer, and produced the sharpest, most terrified salute of his young life, which contained an entire apology and was understood to. She returned it without a word. Consequence and mercy. One gesture. He would make a decent petty officer someday, and on that day, he would know exactly when the decency had started. 0530 the next morning, a damage controlman first class stood at a Y gate in an empty trainer, seating a gasket under the level gaze of a captain in coveralls, doing it wrong, doing it less wrong, doing it right. What happened in that building over the following weeks stayed mostly unrecorded, except that the schoolhouse's pass rate on the fire main board rose 11 points by autumn, and the facilitator who taught it stopped counting the room and started counting the sailors. And on the evening of her first full day in command, Marin Kessler walked alone into the empty battle station's trainer, down the starboard P-way at her exact pace, past the status board somebody had scrubbed very, very clean, to the little recording booth off the control mezzanine. She re-recorded one sentence. Just the film's last line, the one that had always been studio narration, an actor's line, never hers. She said it in the present tense, into the old microphone, once, and it needed no second take. This ship is yours now. Take care of her, and she will bring you home. The booth light died. Her voice stayed in the building, on the screens, in the smoke, in the catechism. 81 recruits at a time would carry out into the fleet every 14 days, for years, most of them never knowing the woman on the film had once pushed a records cart past their bunks while they laughed. The film still plays. The voice on it no longer belongs to a stranger. No text arrived from a number with no country code. No name waited on a memorial wall. The story simply closed, the way a well-run watch closes. Logged, relieved, complete. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.